So what is merchandising, right? It's a great phrase, it's a great word. You go to Wikipedia and it's got this definition that's just wonderful, right? In commerce, merchandising means maximizing sales and revenue through the use of pricing, display, etc. And you think, okay, maximizing revenue, altering prices, figuring out how to display stuff, great. You scroll down on the Wikipedia page for the reference items, for the reference books, and it's textiles. It's like case studies from people selling clothing. And I don't know about you, but I immediately go, okay, so I'm going to read this like really thick textbook. It's going to be about how to sell more clothes in the Gap. And then I'm going to have to figure out how to map that to my world. Ow. Kind of painful. So there's not a lot of prior art that's sort of directly applied. The second thing that stops you from doing merchandising well is that it's not glamorous. So here we have John Carmack. He's about to get a Lifetime Achievement Award for revolutionizing the first-person shooter. It's going to happen in a couple days in this very conference. I guarantee you that the person who figures out how to get 18% more revenue from their storefront per month by effective merchandising will not show up here to get a Lifetime Achievement Award. It's not what we as an industry praise, right? So, first, there's not a lot of settled science. There's not a lot of case studies you can follow. Second, nobody's going to go, oh my God, you brilliant person, let me give you a statue. You'll make more money, but, no statue. And then the third thing is, of course, that as an industry, we are incredibly late on everything, right? So Duke Nukem was what, like 9 years late before it got canceled? Every single software project in this industry is late. Everybody's overworked. Everybody's got to ship stuff. And now you stare at it and you go, oh, okay. So I'm not really sure what to do, and nobody's going to praise me for it. And by the way, I've got other stuff that's compelling. And the net is that merchandising kind of gets left on the side, and people go, yeah, we need to do merchandising, but we have other stuff to do. So what does that mean? Well, the short version of this talk is you can make a ton of money in free-to-play. This previous panel talked about that a little bit. It does require work. It does require thought. But, to use a phrase I love, it ain't rocket surgery. You can do this stuff. You will need to have people on it full time. They will need to pay attention to the data. But most of what they're going to do is really straightforward. Most of what they're going to do, they can learn by going down to the local mall and actually looking at what Banana Republic does, and actually looking at what CVS does, and looking at what Bed Bath & Beyond does. If you just take your junk mail for a week, and for everything that you would have just thrown out, say, does this apply in my storefront? You can do some amazing things. And that's what this talk is about. So it's not your fault. There's a lot of reasons why you haven't done this, and it's not that hard, and you can do it. So let's move forward. So simple things that make a difference. So the first and foremost thing, we all talk about gifting, right? Social phenomena, Facebook, let's give people virtual gifts. The #1 shopping day in the country, and possibly in the world because the United States is the dominant consumer economy, is known as Black Friday. Happens the day after Thanksgiving every year. There's like 3 weeks of television stories about how people are going to line up at 5 a.m. to buy refrigerators. And then like the evening news on Black Friday is how much did Walmart sell? Okay, so what does that tell you? Well, it tells you that a lot of retail is about giving gifts to other people. And it tells you that our entire economy is oriented around this. And now you say to yourself, what about my game? What about my world? And the interesting fact here is Free Realms just got a lot of press for crossing the 9 million user barrier. So there are 9 million people playing Free Realms. That's a huge event. It's a big immersive game or a set of games. And if all of those people were in the US, that would be 3% of the US. So now you're making a game. It's immersive. People self-identify. People talk about their addiction to it or whatever. Do you have a way for the other 97% of the people in the country to give them a gift? I'm not talking about in-game gift to in-game player. I'm talking about grandma to grandson. I'm talking about parent to child. I'm talking about coworker to coworker. If I know that you are a big fan of a game and you play a lot of time on it and your birthday's coming up, can I give you something? How many people work on a product where that's possible? Okay, so there are about 50 people in the room and 3 people raised their hands. That won't work. So here's a little thought experiment. If you go out to Google, and by the way, these slides will be available on SlideShare, and you Google on Home Depot gift card, the #1 result on Google is a link that brings you to the page where you can buy a Home Depot gift card and have it mailed to anyone you please, right? So Home Depot gets it. It's incredibly easy to give somebody money in Home Depot. If you go out to Ragnarok, which is one of the most popular games in the world, and you Google on Ragnarok gift card, you get an RMT system that's actually outside the game that's trying to sell you a character. So you persist, right? You go to Ragnarok itself, and you say, let me try and buy a gift card. Well, it forces you to register. You can't buy anything from the Ragnarok site unless you're registered. And then once you're registered, what you'll discover is you can only buy for yourself, right? I can't actually, you know, I'm a reasonably smart guy, and I spent about 25 minutes on the Ragnarok site. I couldn't figure out how somebody who wasn't a Ragnarok player could give a gift to a Ragnarok player. So you stare at that and you say, you know, the theme here is not impacting game mechanics at all, right? But we have Black Friday. We have this notion of holiday gifts. We have this notion of gifts on the birthday. We know that we have highly immersive worlds where people self-identify as players and would like gifts. And our industry answer is, go to 7-Eleven or Safeway and buy a shiny piece of plastic, right? So if you want to buy a gift for someone who's in a game and you're not in that game, you have to go to a retail outlet and hope you find the appropriate card. What does that mean? Well, that kind of means that, one, you've introduced enormous friction into the gift-giving process. You've probably cut your gifts by 30 to 50%. 2, on every gift you sell, you're paying the people who make the shiny bits of plastic 20%. That's kind of intriguing. Not only did you, chop down a source of revenue, but then you gave away a good chunk of it. And it's not a game design question, it's just a merchandising question. Do you have the ability to sell gift certificates and vouchers and coupons? And if you do, you'll make more money. Make sense to everyone? Cool. Second, bundling. So one very nice thing about Amazon is that they create bundles all the time, and they're not even predefined. You know, this bundle here, they bundled 2 books together that they knew I looked at and said, why don't you buy them both? And they didn't even offer me a discount, they just offered me a little bit of convenience that I could put them both in my shopping cart at the same time. It's kind of interesting. In the real world, you can buy Microsoft Office, and it's Excel, Word, bunch of other Microsoft applications bundled together instead of buying them individually. And they sell them individually, and then they sell it for like 40% off if you buy them all together. And lots of people buy them all together just because that's kind of what you do, right? Such a deal. So bundling is a huge and important idea. If someone's going to try and buy the armor, then you ought to suggest that they buy the armor, the sword, and the cloak of protection. And in your storefront, you should say, did you consider this bundle? It's not a change to your game dynamics. You don't have to invent new items. It's just saying, hey, if you're already going to buy this thing, buy the bigger set. You get a discount off the bigger set. People do it. And all of a sudden, you've taken somebody who was buying one thing, and they've bought 3 things, and they've spent a little bit more. No ethical boundaries crossed there either. But how many of you have played games that have an effective bundling and recommendation strategy? Okay, 1 out of 50. Exactly my point. Okay, discounts and supplements. My wife is a Banana Republic addict. And it's really hard to figure out to me because I don't really like their clothes. But it's a lot like being a slot machine addict. Every time you go to Banana Republic, you get random rewards. If you go to the Banana Republic website right now, it's 15% off when you buy $75 or more. They send her little coupons in the mail. Whenever she crosses a $500 threshold, she gets a $50 discount, and so on and so forth. Does this cost them anything? No, because you wind up spending more money anyway, because you become a frequent shopper.